Cool. So, welcome back. It's been a while. We've been off for a little bit of the summer, but now we're back. We got a lot of stuff coming up, a lot of interesting guests. Check it out on the site. I think we've got some of the future stuff kind of out there, right? So people know dates and what we're talking about, which would be pretty cool. As usual, we're gonna start off first, just the market. Been kind of interesting what's been going on. So, people who've been reading my newsletter know that, week and a half ago, I started to notice that a lot of these thematic names that have been pumped up were starting to sell off, but it wasn't translating into the indices because, the big kind of, the Mag 7 and the stocks that make up the indices weren't. And, kind of wondering whether or not that was a sign of something or, just a normal rotation. Then coming into last week, we had a massive data dump. And, I was kind of saying, I was going to up my hedges, take off some equity exposure. If I was still trading, I would have probably, gone net short, but I'm not, and I didn't. Not trying to time the market or anything like that, but figuring we're sitting at all-time highs. We've got a ton of data coming out. The risk was not in your favor. Big sell-off on Friday, almost completely reversed on Monday. I wrote a whole newsletter Monday morning about, how to kind of handle market downturns, which people are going to probably force me to do every single day because I guess that made the market go up. And then today we're sitting here down 50 basis points on SPY. See the chart, we're between two moving averages, 10-day and 20-day. Could go either way here. I've not been following the news, so I don't know what the excuse is for why it's down. I am currently more hedged than I normally am. Probably keep it that way, until we clearly go back into another uptrend. I think you've got kind of a narrative going on that Friday's jobs number means September is a definite cut for the Fed. The problem is, if you are bullish, you would rather the Fed be cutting because inflation is coming down, not because jobs are coming down. You can argue all sorts of things you want about the jobs number, but PCE is going up. So, keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on tariff weakness flowing into numbers. So again, I'd be a little bit cautious here.
What's PCE, Matt?
PCE is the Fed's preferred inflation measure. So they're going to watch PPI and CPI, but PCE is what they really sink their teeth into. And that was elevated. I forget what day it came out. It may have been Thursday last week, but that was elevated. And that's not such a great thing.
Got it. Okay.
Jeremy, any thoughts?
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind pulling up a 2-hour chart. I'm always the technical analyst, and getting back in the swing of things is kind of like riding a bike for me. But I went ahead and
I'll give you one. Yeah, I got it. 120. Got it.
I went ahead and took advantage of that dip. And as you may know, I sold some puts and took on another position. Not because I'm generally bullish or bearish, but I'm looking at the market as when we have a big wide move like that from top to bottom and back to half. Generally, we end up in kind of a compression or consolidation, and that's when I can make the most selling options. So I love the big range. I'll take advantage of peak to trough and run some income strategies. So for probably another couple weeks here, we're looking at likely a sideways market. We did have a bit of a sell-off, as in profit taking mostly, it looks like. But consolidation's pretty much printed in a chart for now, just looking forward as far as technical analysis goes. Can we break out of this and break up or down? Of course, we can go either way, but we've got quite a bit of reversion targets to the south or some measured move targets to the north. For now, we're in range. That's where I'm going to sell some options.
So Jay, so there's like a gap down here, right? So you went long when that gap down, and now you're getting back to like this average line here, and you're gonna try to get out of that position when you hit some target in that range. Is that
So
it?
for me, I have a lot of long-term positions where I just generate income on them. So regardless of whether or not I can buy and sell, and I do buy and sell some equities as well, but for the most part, I'm more interested in the options income in the long term. So if I can find an opportunity to gather range, I'll go sell puts while the price is down, sell calls while the price is up, and as it goes sideways, I can continue to buy to close those and roll them out or do whatever I want to generate more and more income. The longer it goes sideways, the happier I am. I make income on those.
Okay, I guess I get it. All right, so you're still in there then, right?
No, you don't.
Well,
Stop pretending.
you know, it's so funny, man. That's actually true.
I do scalp some stuff too.
I know it's true. That's why I said it.
All right. So I'm going to introduce our guests here. We got Bill Woolf from Space Force Association, SFA. Million things to talk about. Bill, why don't you just start? Tell us about about SFA, Space Force, what you guys are doing, the Guardians. I don't know, protecting shipping lanes in space. What else do we want to talk about? All that.
The Guardians of the Galaxy, Pat?
Yeah, the Guardians of the Galaxy. I love that, by the way.
They're not real, by the way, just so you know.
I love that, by the way.
All right.
Yeah, well, Matthew, they are real. They are the Space Force Guardians, and they are in fact guarding the galaxy. So, I like to talk about the Space Power Conference we host every year in Orlando, celebrating the Space Force's birthday, and I advertise it as the largest gathering of Guardians in the galaxy. So, it is actually happening. And now let's talk about what that means, in actuality. So just by way of background, and by the way, thanks gentlemen so much for hosting me and bringing me in this discussion. But just by way of disclaimer, I use a financial advisor, and that financial advisor tells me what to do. So I'm here just talking from the auspices of what I'm seeing in the future, just based on the interaction I'm having with the commercial, national security, and private space sectors. So I really appreciate the opportunity to have this discussion. By way of background, I'm a retired Air Force Space Weapons Officer after 24 years in the Air Force. My job was to employ space technologies in support of geographic combatant commands around the globe. That's really the gist of it. And then the example I use is in 2002, I was able to deploy to Afghanistan, where my job was ensuring that special operators were using a technology called Blue Force trackers. And for those of you who don't know, Blue Force trackers are the way we watched individuals and troops move around the battle space in Afghanistan. So that was my job during most of my military career. Did multi-domain command and control, which it's unique in that multi-domain implies that we're using all of our joint forces together to create such a problem for our potential adversaries that they don't want to even engage with us. So that was I spent a lot of my time doing that, and then retired in 2018, and I founded the Space Force Association because there was no nonprofit organization solely focused on the national security space sector. So it was pretty easy. And then 2 months after I established the Space Force Association, President Trump in his first term signed into law the Space Force. And so we celebrate the birthday of the Space Force every December, December 20th. And so what SFA does is we advocate, educate, and inform for a strong U.S. Space Force with our partners and allies around the globe. And that's important because the future space economy, which is probably what we're going to spend some time talking about, is estimated at $1.8 trillion. And the U.S. partners and allies should be at the forefront of that space economy. However, the entire economy, just like in any other domain, is predicated on ensuring freedom of action in the domain, meaning investors aren't going to come to the table if they think that some of the investments that they're going to make are going to be held at risk. So that's why the Space Force is there, is to ensure We don't have any issues whenever we get into the space domain from the commercial sector, civil sector, and then that's why the national security sector exists, is to protect our freedom of action in the space domain. And then Pat, you talked about the shipping lanes. It's no different than our critical shipping lanes that is responsible for moving, goods and services around around the world. Is we have a strong navy that goes in and ensures freedom of action in those critical shipping lanes from pirates and other nefarious actors. So yeah, really excited to be on this talk and looking forward to the discussion.
Cool. So, we're talking a little bit beforehand, and I told you we had a guest on a couple of weeks back. What was it? Space Phoenix?
Yep.
Pat, is that?
Yep, Space
Yeah,
Phoenix.
Space Phoenix. And what they did is, they would their company transports stuff from Earth to space.
Or
And
trying to.
well, I mean, there's nothing. Yeah. I mean, in the future, they are going to be a transport company once we have a bunch of stuff in space.
Yeah.
And what he was talking about was, in the future, we're going to have, data centers, for example, in space, which, data centers are integral to AI. So they're important. And it got me obviously thinking, if we've got a data center in like Indiana and China, Russia, North Korea wants to take it out, they can't. I mean, they've got to invade our country and go through miles and miles of territory to get to that data center. If we've got data centers in space, anyone could kind of take that out. So I immediately kind of, went to, man, how are we going to defend all of this stuff? It would seem to me that going forward, something like Space Force would end up being the biggest branch of the military we have if we've got all this stuff in space.
I'm not going to argue that point, Matthew, at all. I agree with you, by the way. I think we need to re-examine all of the services and determine, how are we going to wage warfare in the future? And as technology increases, I always talk about this inverse technology curve, where as technology increases, investment in large scale manufacturing complex might need to decrease. In other words, the systems that we're buying today might not be the systems we need to buy in the future based on the advancement of technology. But let me pivot back, because your comment about Indiana is important one, because you
Wisconsin.
described
No, I said Indiana.
Oh,
Either way,
but it could be Wisconsin.
It
Yeah,
could be
either way.
Wisconsin. It could be Connecticut.
Anywhere
where the FFA is, Pat,
you bet.
all right. Okay.
But you described the defense against a kinetic attack, meaning North Korea would have to create some kind of technique to where they came in and attacked us physically. That's called a kinetic attack. There's also the non-kinetic attack option, where they're going in through some back door into that data center and disrupting power supply grids. So that's happening, by the way. We have nefarious actors right now that are getting into critical infrastructure via non-kinetic attack on the terrestrial domain here on Earth, and disrupting a significant amount of infrastructure. So that's why there's ongoing discussions about the creation of a cyber force in the future. I don't know exactly where that is in Congress, but that's yet another domain. So we always talk about the 5 domains, and it's sea, air, land, space, and cyber. And so we've got to have, there needs to be a military force protecting those domains, ensuring freedom of action in the domain. So let me get to your point in outer space. When critical infrastructure is going to be on orbit, which, by the way, it already is. We have critical infrastructure, national security interests are in orbit, which is why the Space Force was created in the first place, is to protect those national security assets. Now, to your point, more infrastructure is going to be created on orbit. In fact, we'll start talking about, space tourism. And when is Hilton or Marriott going to create a space station to where you have folks visiting the space station? Right now, you have private astronauts going up Jared Isaacman went up twice as a private citizen in orbit. And then you ask, who's protecting that private citizen? Well, if you ask the Pentagon will say it's up to that private citizen to protect themselves. Imagine if we said that in any other domain, where we're like, hey, if you go out on a ship in the maritime domain and you're out in the middle of nowhere, no one's going to come help you. I mean, that's scary for commerce, for anybody who's
Not for pirates, it's not though.
yeah, pirates are like, hey, this is great. So yeah,
Arr!
there's space pirates out there right now, figuring out how to basically test the resolve of the U.S. with regard to this. So yeah, we've got to ensure that whatever policies we're coming up with in the future, those policies account for the future construct. The last point I'll make is President Trump, in his inauguration speech, regardless of your political affiliation, he said we're going to Mars. Okay, well, you just don't go to Mars. You set up infrastructure on orbit, you set up infrastructure on the moon, and then you set up infrastructure on Mars. So, all of this is critical, and we need to be talking about it and creating the future now, having the discussion about the future that we forecast, and ensuring that we have that ability very quickly.
The other thing that jumps out at me is it would seem like at some point warfare as we know it would change. Like, ever since we've been fighting each other, you always want the high ground. And space is the ultimate high ground. So, like, instead of flying a bomber 34 hours over Iran and putting those pilots at risk, why not launch a bunker buster from a satellite? And then, that kind of brings me back to thinking about the whole U-2 spy plane story where, we had, we could see whatever we wanted over the Soviet Union because we were flying so high they couldn't shoot it down until they learned how to shoot it down. And, it starts this whole race. It would seem to me that a lot of the future of warfare is people trying to get the high ground and then other people trying to knock us off the high ground, versus spending $10 billion on a battleship that I can take out from a satellite.
Right.
Bill?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Matthew, I'm not saying anything that I don't disagree with. I agree with you 100%. It goes back to the point about as technology advances, how is warfare going to change? Which is really what the Space Force is thinking about is, how can they contribute? But again, they're operating under their congressionally mandated charge, which is to create the Space Force we need. But, I can go into the current Space Force, the Space Force we currently have and the struggles they're having. I mean, if you think about it, let's just talk comparatively. How big is the Marine Corps? How big is the Air Force? How big is the Army? You're talking hundreds of thousands of folks in other services, and you've got 20,000 folks in the Space Force. I'm sorry, but that is not the number we need, focusing on the space domain and ensuring critical assets are protected and creating the future we want based on the technological opportunities that exist before us.
What struggles are they having?
Well, it's just the manpower itself. You have 30,000 folks, Pat, and that's just not enough people to do the congressionally mandated job of protecting U.S. partners and allies' interests in, from, and to space. We need more manpower.
And like what kind of people, like engineers or, that kind of thing?
Yeah, everybody, engineers, aerospace engineers, acquisition professionals, operators, all of it. We need a lot more folks.
And we don't have like the budget for it. It's not mandated or whatever the words are. I mean,
Yeah, so the budgets, what's interesting is in reconciliation, they did a pretty good job. They got an additional $10 billion for this fiscal year going through reconciliation, which is great. So, when you talk about the investment, you've got 40 billion invested in the Space Force, 40 billion invested in NASA, just as a comparison. And then, you've got hundreds of billions of dollars invested in the Army, Navy, and the Air Force. I think the Air Force is projected at $270 billion is part of our defense budget going to
Right.
the Air Force. So back to your point, Matthew, do we need to realign resources based on the future? That's a great question. And I agree we should examine that.
Right.
And then
I
I
see.
had a little piece to put in, as far as logistics
Yeah,
goes,
please.
and I think Musk, I don't quote it exactly, but was essentially aligning with as there's more and more companies in the market of space logistics, obviously cost of payload weight will go down. And when you say like let's put bunker busters in space, I mean that makes sense, but at the same time, and those bombs are quite heavy. However, it takes
Right.
a lot of energy to put things up there. So if you have something that can kinetically return that energy, like a heavy tungsten rod, it doesn't need to be a bunker buster. It just needs to be a heavy piece of metal that you send with a whole lot of force, goes right through the ground. So logistically, if we think about it, I mean the cost effectiveness of putting things in orbit for defense purposes, not just for defending stuff that's up there, because mostly the attacks won't be kinetic, as you say. It wouldn't want to put a field of debris in orbit that denies access to space altogether or orbit altogether. You would rather zap something with an EMP or backdoor it and take it over or whatever you want to do with it. That's more ethical as far as defending things that are in an orbit position as an asset. But the defense to the ground from orbit is kind of interesting because as that logistical cost goes down, you'll be able to put a lot more different kinds of ordnance in orbit. And yeah, it will effectively change the way warfare is handled on the ground. I mean, you wouldn't even need to be there, and heck, you wouldn't even need drones. You just point and click. So
Right. So I think, let me say, I think this is what the market's recognizing, right? What Jeremy's saying, the cost per whatever is going down. And that's why these stocks are just screaming, right? I mean, that's kind of the analysis, right, Matt?
I don't know. You've got a handful of so-called, meme type stocks that, move like meme stocks do. I mean, I think people realize, all right, the future is going to be based on space. There's going to be a bunch of stuff up there. Yeah, it's a lot like some of these new industries where there aren't, and please correct me if I'm saying anything that's wrong, there aren't public companies yet where, hey, these guys are the clear leader. Like my guess, and again, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that somebody like a SpaceX, is probably the leader in this. SpaceX isn't a public company. So I've got to invest in, RKLB and LUNR and ASTS because they are public companies. And maybe if you look at the defense of space, maybe that's an Andro. Again, not a public
right,
company. So I'm buying a Kratos or a Red Cat or, something like that. But that's my thinking on it. I don't know, Bill, any
that's where I was
thoughts
going with
there?
it. But yeah,
Yeah, what I'm seeing in the market, at least from the VC sector, is VCs are looking, they want the crystal ball as well. So they're kind of looking at these companies, determining where to invest resources based on the longevity of the company. And to your point, a lot of the underpinning is defense. So if you land a defense contract, that's the A answer, and Earl's been working on that for years. And congratulations to the team for landing that contract with the Army and bringing VR back into the game. So that's going to be exciting to watch for sure. So similarly, when you talk about innovation and what's happening, and that's the biggest fear I think that we face today is showing benefit for these innovative startup companies who can't survive the valley of death. And I'm seeing it happen with, execs right now where they're in fundraising mode, but they just can't seem to get through that valley of death to government contracting to sustain. So what's going to happen to that innovation? It's going to go away, and that's going to be the problem. So what we're trying to figure out here at the organization, at the association, is how do we create this capability matrix such that we can align future technologies and capabilities to defense apparatus, to what the defense infrastructure needs. And then the other thing I would say is this whole concept of commercial augmented space reserve, or CASR, is the conversation that's happening between the Space Force and commercial entities to describe what does it mean for a commercial capability to be dual or triple used to support defense when necessary and not support defense when not necessary. So it's the first time in any domain where we've spoken about this kind of concept. I mean, the air domain has it, but it's only to move troops and logistics and services, using transport of, commercial aircraft to move logistics around. But when we talk about every day using commercial capabilities to augment Space Force space power mission set, that's pretty compelling.
So let me ask you this. In the AI space, there's always talk about, whoever wins the AI race controls the world. And everyone worries, are we ahead or China ahead? And, smart people seem to think we're a couple of months ahead of China. Maybe we are, maybe we aren't. It occurs to me that space is more important because from a military standpoint, right now we're the superpower, but if somebody is kicking our butt in space, then everything we're doing on Earth seems sort of obsolete at that point. Again, they've got the high ground. They can knock out our GPS and they can fire missiles at us from places that we can't fire back on. It seems to me that's the most important. Do you have a sense of, in this race to dominate space, are we number one here, or are we playing catch up?
Great question. And, I've done interviews with Space Force senior leaders, and I've asked them the same question. So I'll just pair it back to you, what they've told me. Specifically, a good friend of mine, Lieutenant General Rock Miller, who is the commander of Space Operations Command. And Space Operations Command is responsible for all operations and, making sure that we have trained, ready, capable guardians applying specific technologies to ensure we have freedom of action in the domain. And so he said, we are unequivocally leading the world right now. Now, the problem is, and you've said it, the problem is we do have policies over here in the US, and our partners and allies, we have policies that we adhere to. Well, our potential adversaries, China doesn't have those same policies. So
Yeah.
everything in China, everything that you say is a private sector in China is not private sector. Everything's national security apparatus. The communist state implies that everything they're doing over there is with national security interests. Everything. So they don't have, when you look at our commercial launch capabilities and the amount of throughput, the amount of launches that we've had in the recent past, a small percentage of those launches are national security launches. A very large percent are commercial launches that are taking place, on the eastern and western ranges. Conversely, in China, every single launch has national security implications. So that's what we have to think about: is what is the long-term strategy for China? And if hypothetically speaking, they plant a flag on the moon, is it their way of saying this is ours now?
Good point.
Right.
How do those rules work? Tell me if you don't know, but can China just kind of claim moon territory and it's theirs, or is it, totally up in the air? Whoever owns space gets to decide, where they plant their flag.
Yeah, it's kind of the wild, wild west right now. We don't have the policies in place. In fact, the way, everyone's kind of reflecting back to the Artemis Accords and believing that if we just sign the Artemis Accords, which is exploration of the lunar surface, then everything's fine. But the fact is that's not the case. I mean, we're just believing something that may not be true, to your point, because soon things will start to happen, and this will this question will be posed again, which is, what are we doing about it? Well, we should be thinking about those contingencies right now, or thinking about that future right now. So one organization over in Belgium, they created the Washington Compact. And the Washington Compact is a way to try to get countries to agree to useful, a useful outer space for all, which is great, and we agree with that as an organization. The question is, what happens if it's not? And we should probably have clear national security objectives that say this is what we are going to do as a nation, partners, and allies. And right now, we don't have, back to your point, Matt, we don't have those policies in place. And if you look at it, one of the contributing factors is there's no one who's a retiree of the Space Force that is an elected official. We have no congressmen, we have no senators, and so what we did as an organization is we helped facilitate the establishment of the Space Force Caucus in the House and the Senate to try to tease out these types of talks and try to get our lawmakers to start having these discussions about what this future is going to look like. How does the U.S. partners and allies stay in front of this future space economy?
And if this keeps moving along, let's say at the snail's pace it is, I mean, how far away, how many years away are we from like James Bond, where you've got the battle out in space, and you've got that machine that sucks up the satellite, and guys in spacesuits and lasers. I mean, how many years away is that?
When you say James Bond, what you really mean is Elon Musk. I mean, because here's an individual, independent of the bureaucracy, said, "Hey, I'm going to be a disruptor. I'm going to disrupt the game," and he did. He totally disrupted the launch game, and he's continuing to do that. And now what he's talking about is, I want to set up a private moon base. Who's going to stop him?
And you like Musk?
Elon Musk.
Yeah. You like him?
Hey, I think what he's done technologically for us and their community is phenomenal. Regardless of what I think about him personally, I think what he's done is
Agreed.
tremendous. And SpaceX is a supporter of SFA. So yeah, we're big
Let me
fans.
backfill. I've got a couple backfill questions for you here, right? So the first one, in no particular order, I read something recently about there's like China is dogfighting satellites now. Like, is that true? And or should we be alarmed about that? Is that a big deal?
100%. They absolutely are. In fact, that was at a event that we hosted in DC where that information came out from Major General Gagnon talked about that, who is the director of intelligence for the Space Force. So yeah, he's talking about the fact that China is moving at great speed and capability in terms of maneuverability in the space domain. And they are tracking our satellites. They know what our satellites do. They've got technology out there that can disable satellites, do kinetic attack on satellites without causing a tremendous amount of debris. So yeah, it's a very dangerous environment that we're in, and people need to be aware of it.
Okay, so Matt mentioned like GPS positioning. I read something recently that Space Force is testing quantum navigation, where if you knock out the GPS, it still works. Any comments on that or where we are on that?
Yeah, same. As technology increases, we got to examine other opportunities. And if the GPS constellation is a target and it disrupts all of our infrastructure, well, that we probably shouldn't have a single point of failure. We should have, multiple technologies that support global positioning capabilities.
Okay, one more thing. Rocket Lab, they actually had a 10 billion US Army Golden Dome project they just signed up for. And any thoughts on it's not like they aren't doing anything. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so Golden Dome, I think President Trump said the Golden Dome was going to be about 150 billion. I think I was talking to some leaders in Congress, and I think they're talking more about it being closer to 500 billion to an 800 billion dollar investment strategy. And then from a Golden Dome perspective, and if you watch, Space Foundation did a pretty compelling interview with General Gutlein. Congratulations to him. He was the Vice Chief of Space Operations, and he just got confirmed to lead the Golden Dome effort for the U.S. And so he spoke about, a lot of the context of the Golden Dome and what he's looking at with him and his team across the services. But we use system of systems a lot, and everyone uses it a lot. But this is an example of where you're going to see a lot of contractors coming to the table that are saying, "Hey, we got the solution," and I think it's going to be multiple solutions from multiple technologies, from multiple organizations that are going to really create the Golden Dome of the future that we need. Which, by the way, you guys already spoke to it. What is the target tracking capability, and then how do we take out targets in orbit? So the technology is probably already there. The key is how do you combine all the technologies together?
So if I said, what's the Golden Dome winner? Is it Raytheon or Lockheed or who would you say? Is there one?
I think all the big fives have technologies and capabilities where they're arguing for resources, and so all of them are in the race for sure.
Can you put up the RTN chart, Matt?
You
Something
mean
fresh.
RTX?
Is it Raytheon? I thought RTN was Raytheon.
RTX.
Oh, it's RT.
Yeah.
Oh, it's RTX. My bad. RTX. Yeah, there you go.
They've been called worse.
Chart. Last question.
Hold on, that's a 2-hour chart.
Oh yeah. Sorry, my bad.
Here we go. That's even better. Actually, it looks a little toppy here, actually. But
All right, last question, just on the off the cuff thing. So I was reading about this thing called 3-Eye Atlas. You know what that is? There's
No.
a theory, this thing moving out in space, a couple hundred miles away, that some people are talking about some unknown thing, right? So let's say we have some unknown thing approaching our world or whatever. What's going to happen then?
Yeah, I think you should see a lot of things happen then. But it's funny because you look at you can read what NASA does for meteors coming our way. You hear a lot out of NASA, and they'll report on meteors coming this way. And hey, it's nearing Earth. It's 100,000 miles away, but it's getting close to Earth, kind of thing. And so, yeah, that's an interesting question. And so what I've been talking with other folks about is maybe it's time to start talking about a Department of Space under this administration, having a direct report, because space is that critical to our economy. It's critical to our day, our everyday lives. And so we should examine what a Department of Space looks like, who would be probably thinking about that. And going back to your AI question, Matt, and I kind of glossed over it, but yeah, everything AI relies on infrastructure. Meaning, if we have the network infrastructure, then we have AI. But if we don't have the network infrastructure, then AI is kind of obsolete. So yes, if space is taking out, which is part of the infrastructure, along with land sea cables, then yeah, AI is kind of irrelevant.
Good point.
let me ask you this: you Pat sort of hit on an interesting point, not quite, but
Thanks, bro. I got like half of a compliment there. That's
half
pretty
of a
good.
compliment.
Take it, man.
We all know that the dinosaurs got taken out by an impact. There is evidence out there that, the whole flood myth and all that could have also been an impact. We know what happened at Tunguska in the early 1900s. That was in the Siberian, but if that had been New York City, that would have been awful. Yeah. Do we have, I mean, yeah, we can track this stuff. Do we have the ability now to shoot this stuff down if we need to, or are we pretty much at the mercy right now of what's up there?
Yeah, right now we've still not figured out the Armageddon challenge. And I'm a big Armageddon fan, movie fan. Yeah, so great movie. We still not figured out.
Close my eyes.
I don't know. He's singing.
please, no singing.
And then, 2012, the Ellie, the extinction level event. Yeah, that's probably one of the things. It's probably why Musk is so up on trying to create, trying to make the human species an interplanetary species, not because we've destroyed Earth, per se. I mean, yeah, there's people out there that would say we destroyed Earth, so we need to go find a new one. No, not necessarily. It's Earth has been destroyed in the past. And so maybe it'd be a good idea to have a contingency plan. And so Musk is saying, let's have a contingency plan. So we're all about creating factories on the moon and cities on Mars. Where are we at with that? And if we can get in front of it, it's probably now's the time to do it.
So tinfoil hat question for you. And if you don't know the answer or you can't answer it, that's fine, but I'm going to throw it out there.
What does tinfoil hat mean, by the way, Matt? Like nerd?
Conspiracy
Yeah,
theory.
yeah.
Oh, conspiracy theory. Okay, I got it. Okay.
So a bunch of years ago, I forget how many, this guy, I think his name was Gary McKinnon. He hacked NASA. And one of the things he found when he hacked NASA was a list, and this was way back before Trump did the Space Force, a list of non-terrestrial officers. He didn't get to print it out. NASA figured it out pretty quickly. US tried to extradite him. As far as I know, we didn't get him. He's living happily ever after in Britain. But there's controversy about, is there a secret space force that's been around for a bunch of years that we don't know about? Anything you can comment on that? Any thoughts on that?
Oh, plenty of thoughts. But no, I don't believe that we have a secret space force that exists somewhere. I mean, again, I've been in the military space community for a long time, and been read into some classified programs, and never once did there ever come a time when they said, "Hey, by the way, don't tell anyone, but check this out." Now, that being said, from a
This is my
technological
night job, by the way.
that's right. Hey, congratulations, Pat. But yeah, from a technological standpoint, why wouldn't we have capabilities that are out there that people don't know about?
Right.
Which is probably contributes to a lot of the conspiracy theory discussions. So yeah, there's stuff that's out there that we don't know about, and that's okay. That's that we should have that, so that our adversaries don't know the capability exists.
I got another question for you. So, I've read in some of your research and guys that you talk about like the difference between like small drones coming over the border, like how do we defend against that? And then we have these bigger rockets or whatever being fired from space, whatever. But like talk about like the small drones, like if Mexico, if let's say someone goes to Mexico, sends 500 small drones, $500 drones over the border, like how do we defend against that?
Yeah, it's called a low altitude radar technology that exists across the southern border, and they're trying to figure that out. I'm pretty sure of it, but you're right. The drone technology is continuing to advance. The swarm technology is advancing. AI is going to only, accelerate that. So yeah, that's going to be an issue in the future for sure.
And then
Got it.
the other thing I scratched the surface on a little over a month ago was quantum radar. And I know there's a few private companies involved in development of that. Are there any public companies that are involved at least a little bit into that field? Because I know that's going to be a necessary thing to have that can both collaborate ground radar and orbital radar systems together.
Yeah, from a radar perspective, and I can't talk quantum specifically, but from a radar perspective, there are companies out there that are creating radar technology on orbit such that we can see through objects in space to see what the inner components are. So radar is going to be critical. Think Orbital is the company, and they're working on that technology today.
Very cool.
Think Orbitable, they're not a public company, right?
Not
No.
yet.
Okay, so Firefly is going public this week, symbol FLY.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that one, Bill?
I think what Firefly is doing is phenomenal. Jason Kim or Lil Kim, their CEO, is a friend, and what they were able to demonstrate landing on the moon was phenomenal. And that's just the beginning. And Texas as a state, or as I like to say, the country of Texas, has got some tremendous space capabilities and technologies that are continuing to flourish down there in the state, and they're making it easy for companies to move to the state of Texas. We work with Midland quite a bit. Midland, what they want to do is create the first inland spaceport. Right now, all the spaceports are external. They're on the
All
coast,
right.
so that if a rocket fails, that it's not going to kill anyone. So Midland is geographically situated in Texas to allow for any company to come in and do point-to-point launch. So imagine launching from Midland, Texas over to Australia, or, from a security perspective, how to get resources in country in 30 minutes or less is going to be pretty critical. And so Midland is interesting. But yeah, going back to Firefly, I think it's just the beginning from Firefly. I think it's going to be exciting to watch them continue to excel.
We're
how about-
going to do a 2X on Firefly, by
That's
the way.
too fly,
Too fly.
by the way. How about PLTR, Palantir? Any thoughts on that?
Palantir is another good one. Absolutely. They're going to continue to thrive, I think, in this environment.
Yeah, they got a bright future.
Yeah, from a data perspective.
Dig deep on that one.
Got it.
There's more.
Yeah, it's all about data. Going back to AI, you don't have AI without data and large language models. So you need the data, which, by the way, what we did at SFA is we appointed Matt Domo, who is a co-founder of AWS, to our chair of our board of directors, so that we can ensure that we're on the cutting edge of AI technology here at the association. But Palantir is critical to that from a data layer perspective.
Making connections. Nice. That's the way to do it.
Okay.
Agree.
All right. How about LHX, L3 Harris Tech? Any thoughts on those guys?
Yeah, they're another great company. I can't forecast specifics at all.
LHX.
But they're working on. They've got a lot in terms of space control and just creating space control technologies for the Space Force. And space control. When I say space control, I mean negating other satellites' capabilities and technology. And ensuring that we have access. So L3 Harris is doing some phenomenal work there.
Any of the drone companies that maybe you see being able to break into the big guys and do some innovative things in space-based technology?
Here, I think what's interesting is, I'm trying to think of a company that just moved to Midland. But they're focusing on hypersonics. I think that's going to be the key. When you start talking about drone technology, when you start combining drone with hypersonics, that's really the potential future is, what does it mean to have horizontal launch technology inland to where you can replenish critical assets in space from an air-based platform? Jeremy, you mentioned earlier about the cost to launch. Well, if you can reduce cost of launch based on a horizontal launch platform, that's going to be extremely beneficial. So it's going to be both vertical launch and horizontal launch in the future. And then from a drone technology, how great would it be that this drone horizontal launch hypersonic creates capabilities?
Says Kratos.
When you say hypersonic, what does that mean?
Hypersonic, yeah, faster than the speed of sound.
And from a launch perspective, I mean, if you ever watched a rocket go up, they always have that inverted roll, and then they go into an arc. Well, that's when they reach a speed where they're nearing escape velocity. So if you're already at escape velocity, you can save a whole bunch on energy to reach orbit. So that's huge. And if you got a drone company that can do that with unmanned vehicles, I mean, even better.
Yeah, Mach 5 is basically what we're talking about. So 3,836 miles per hour.
Moving, baby.
Yeah. SpinLaunch is a technology that they're pretty interesting too, because here's something that just takes a spin, and they just spin it up and then they just launch it.
Centripetal force is incredible. I'm amazed that thing stays together.
Yep.
So did you know this company symbol DRS? It's called Leonardo DRS. Do you know these guys?
I don't know them. I've spoken to them before, but I don't know them.
Oh, right. Okay. Because in some of my research, this name kept coming up, this Leonardo DRS. I didn't know what
Rock
they did.
likes talking about them. Whenever you go into like that field, that comes up as one of the ranked companies. I can't figure out exactly why, but I'll have to dig a little deeper.
All right. Okay. Any questions, Matt? Because I still have some to ask, but I don't want to be dominating all the time in here.
I think
No.
I think we can.
I think
we can hand it to Pat. He's got it. He's got a couple other companies to mention. I don't know. I can see it in your eyes there, but.
Well, no. I'm just kind of going through some of my questions here. I just want to make sure I'm not missing any. So let's talk about cybersecurity in space a little bit. Any thoughts on that? I mean, we've touched on it a little bit, but how important is that?
Yeah.
Critically important. In the way I think about it, back and again, I hate doing this, but I'll just say it anyhow. War stories are war stories because uh, they're just evidence that we've seen this before. And so I remember when a new aircraft was being developed back in the day, we came to the table around the planning committee came to the table and we were talking about the criticality of cyber. And we said, hey, cyber's got to be baked into the development of this technology from the onset. And if we don't, we're going to create a vulnerability that's going to cause us tremendous turmoil in the future. And so that's the only point I'd make is if you're not thinking about cybersecurity from infrastructure perspective from the onset, all you're doing is creating a tremendous vulnerability in the future. And there's adversaries that would try to seek that out and take it out. So Delta 6 is the Delta underneath Space Operations Command responsible for cybersecurity operations. And so those guys and gals are doing some great work and ensuring that our assets are protected on space.
So Matt, I got a question for you, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, is this an issue? I mean, these stocks are obviously going up a ton. Is this more of an issue? There's just not enough supply of space stocks. So it's really kind of a supply demand thing. That's why all these things are going so vertical or what?
I mean, there's that. I mean, a lot of these are smaller companies, high short interest. The retail guys know how to play that game and move those stocks. You can use the options, create a gamma squeeze. And yeah, you don't, have as much, again, you don't have SpaceX to trade. You don't have Anduril to trade.
Right.
There are probably a bunch of others that are private now. I mean, you didn't have Firefly, you're going to. And you'll have a 2X on Firefly.
Right.
There's just not, that much out there. And, when you look at like the big defense stocks, they may end up being the winners, but those aren't going to move. I mean, it's kind of like, Jeremy and I talk about the nuclears all the time. And, I love BWXT, which today is moving. But, that's like the only nuclear company that's got like real stuff going on versus like, an Oklo or, an SMR.
It's actual things happening instead of
That-
just speculation into the 10-year future.
Right, except for future speculation.
Right.
Right.
DOIG.
Oh, all right. So I kind of just going through my list here. So what is so Bill? So if you wanted to check out like Space Force, can I go into Vandenberg Air Force Base or any of these places and look in there? Is there some way like people can get involved? Like you could go to JFK and what do they call that? Like the Cape
Maybe get a
Canaveral.
ride?
You could go down to Cape Canaveral, check all that out. Can you do any stuff like that?
Yeah, Pat, I would just encourage you to just go down to Cape Canaveral Space Force Base or and just walk around the pads down there. I say that I'm being facetious. No, you can't, and that's part of the problem is, public access to Space Force is difficult. It's challenging. They're all behind guarded facilities, oftentimes concertina wire at the top of it because it's a critical infrastructure. And so you can't see the ops centers or the ops floors and go talk to guardians. And guardians young guardians are working, 8, 12-hour shifts with young families. So they're task saturated in terms of what's expected of them. So no, they're not easily accessible folks. And by the way, there's only, 9,000 uniformed guardians. The complementary is civilians, so there's not a lot of guardians out there to interact with. So that's why we as an organization exist. So, shameless plug for the Space Force Association. If you're not already a member, come be a member, volunteer.
Want to pull that up, Matt? What's your website? Or,
USSFA.org.
Yeah, I put it in the description.
What is USSFA.org?
Yeah. There you go. Just go
They
there.
take credit cards and checks
That's
and
right.
cash, by the way. Send them an envelope.
I've got a check. I actually have a membership check sitting on my desk right now that I got to deposit for $35.
All
I,
right.
I like how the stars are moving
Right.
and stuff. This is cool. It feels like I'm in space.
That's
Oh,
right.
there's satellites.
All right, last question. Last question. This just popped in because I've been thinking through my questions here. So there's the Israel Golden Dome experience, right? So was that a win? Is that a loss? How'd that work? On a scale of 1 to 10, that was a 10 or a 9 or a 6 or what was that?
Yeah, I think they demonstrated the technology works.
Yeah.
Yep.
But
Got
not 100%.
No, there's always going to be, with technology, and anytime you overwhelm a system, the weaknesses will be identified. So yeah, the Iron Dome, the Israel Iron Dome that the Golden Dome is based on is demonstrated its value, I think, for Israel.
And would we I think the company I haven't, it starts with an R, I have it written down here somewhere, but would we hire them? Would Space Force hire those guys? Like an Israeli
I don't-
defense contractor?
Yeah, I don't know. I know the biggest thing I think is, foreign investment in. Anytime you talk about foreign investment, there's policies associated with that. So, what we encourage companies to do is have a place in the U.S. If they want to do business with the Department of Defense, they've got to have a location in the United States. And so that's what we tell folks all the time is if you're interested in doing work with the DoD, the U.S. DoD, just set up a shop here in the U.S. somewhere.
So as
And
long
right
as
now,
it's
Texas is
subsidiary,
making
it's
it
just,
pretty
if
easy.
they have a U.S. subsidiary, you're cool with it, especially in Texas and Midland. You're down.
Well, again, it's not us that make the
Well,
final determination, but does just in compliance with FAR compliance, you've got to have, if you're doing business with the DoD, you have to have
Got it.
location here in the U.S.
Yeah, you better have a physical
cool.
address on the technical manual that leads back to a U.S. company.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
Got
right.
it. Okay. Great combo.
Hey, good stuff, man.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
this is awesome,
right?
you guys. I really appreciate the opportunity to get on camera here and talk for an hour about, again, the future space economy, the criticality of the space economy, the opportunity for investment, the excitement around the globe about the space domain, and seeing companies coming out of the woodwork with good ideas and startups that are really doing some phenomenal work. So yeah, I think we're just on the precipice of seeing great things here in the next 5 years, and so happy to be part of the
Yeah, I
conversation.
think we're onto something here.
All right.
Definitely something to return to very soon.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks,
Have a
guys.
good day, guys.
All right,
Thanks
thank
again.
you.
We'll see you guys next time. Catch us on Thursday. We'll see you.
All right.